gone! Wow, his first big league swing is going to be a grand slam home run. Swing and drive! Belton right! Welcome to the show!
A little bit of a postseason themed episode here on the call up. We're going to be talking about rookie performers so far in the playoffs and what our expectations are for them moving forward into next year, because I think there's a little bit of the overzealous nature of fans when we see guys really perform in the postseason. So that says a lot about how they can kind of rise to the big moment, but it doesn't mean you should shift your expectations for 2024. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and hit on some of these big names because, Jack, this has been a postseason that I think has just been littered with young talent. And it's always like that to a degree, but I felt like this year, the young talent has really just taken over.
Yeah, particularly the rookie class, right? Because typically it's young talent that's really showing up and showing out, but it's second and third year guys. You occasionally have a rookie that does it, a la Jeremy Pena last year, but a lot of the intrigue comes from the 25, 26-year-olds that are maybe getting their first or second taste of the postseason. Now it's truly all rookies, pretty much. Corbin Carroll is balling out. Evan Carter looks amazing. Josh Young has a bomb. Like, there are so many guys that are performing that are truly rookies. Oh, by the way, Gunnar Henderson, who's going to probably win AL Rookie of the Year unanimously, hit a ball to Mars yesterday. So just fascinating to see like all these true rookies and guys that were on the top 100 list coming into the year ball out on a national and international stage.
100%. And, some of the performances that have led into the postseason, guys that kind of figured something out. We talked about Gabriel Moreno on the Just Baseball show. Like, that's a guy who I think you can shift your expectations for 2024 in a positive way because of the way he closed out the regular season and then just the way he's performed on the postseason scale. But I also want to provide a little bit of context on the other side, because not to knock down guys that are performing in the playoffs, I just want to highlight, how I think it might look over 162 and whether any of these players have really changed since we talked about them, as you mentioned, on the top 100 list, which we will be updating, by the way, by the end of this week. So look out for that, as well as many of these guys have graduated. But Jack, you have the list of names, a list of guys that are all playing some sort of role in the playoffs this year. And we're just going to kind of highlight, discuss, and move on to the next one. But it's a really fun group of guys of kind of different levels of prospect intrigue prior to their rookie season. And I think different levels of contribution through these playoffs, but all of which have played a part in their respective team success so far this season, and especially in the playoffs thus far.
Yeah, so I left some guys on the cutting room floor, and the reason I did that is because there were some guys with minimal prospect intrigue that we could talk about. Like, hey, if you want to hear about Andrew Saalfrank, unfortunately, I don't think this is your podcast, or a Yennier Cano. I don't think this is your pod. Cano was an all-star, but he didn't have prospect intrigue at all coming into this year. He was a 30-year-old rookie. Also left out guys that have been eliminated. Milwaukee was running out Weimer, Frelick. They run out Terang, too. They ran out Monasterio, still had rookie status. We're not talking about guys that were bounced in the wildcard series. It is active rookies that had some level of prospect intrigue coming into the year. And we'll start with Texas, two guys, Evan Carter and Josh Young. Let's start with Evan Carter, who has been the talk of the postseason at this point in the American League. Evan Carter, through 4 postseason games, is 5 for 10 with 3 doubles, a homer, and he's walked 6 times. He reached base in 10 of his first 11 postseason plate appearances to begin his career. Carter has a couple of diving catches on his book already, made a nice running catch in left center yesterday in Baltimore. This guy is playing like an all-star and an MVP candidate. Problem is, when you expand that over 162 next year, that might not necessarily be the case. This is really fun, though.
It's really fun. And it's a testament to how polished he is, both just in his approach to the game and his approach at the plate. And I think that's why the Rangers felt like, hey, we can bring this kid up. Maybe he just turned 21 years old and he can potentially help us. And he has helped them. Where I think people might be getting a little carried away is maybe shifting their focus to next year's. And he's probably going to be a rookie of the year front runner. And, he should be one of the front runners going into next year because he's getting valuable experience. He's performing on a big stage and he's showing us some of the things that he has going for him. But, I'm interested to see how people kind of go into next year and what their expectations are for Carter. I think what's really helped Carter make the transition is, one, you mentioned the athleticism in the outfield and things like that, being able to play all three outfield spots and being, in left or right, mostly left. It's impressive how much ground he can cover out there. At the plate, guy doesn't expand the zone. Since he was called up, including the postseason, he's running a 13% chase rate. So that was what allowed him to get up and make some sort of contribution. He really shrinks the zone, looks for something he can pull. If it's borderline or on the outer half, doesn't expand the zone, some ridiculously impressive takes. And again, once he finds that pitch that he can pull in the air, it doesn't even have to be middle in, it could be elevated away. He will pull it in the air and hit it with authority. So he's not straying from his approach. And in this small sample, that's going to work. Over 162, I have some questions as to whether that very pull happy approach will work. I think he's pulling around 60% of the time at the big league level. But that said, we have a guy already that knows himself really well, that is going to be a good player for a very long time, is already flashing some of the power and the athleticism, but I don't think it's going to be as automatic and seamless in 2024, maybe as people are going to expect it to be because of how good he's been in the postseason. I think there might be some growing pains over 162 next year, but I'm enjoying every second of what we've seen so far.
For sure. And his 2 or 3 week cameo in the big leagues before the postseason was also really good, but it's such a small sample. And the thing about baseball is you do it across 162. You have 187 days where you're playing pretty much every single day. You get 4 days off, 5 days off for the All-Star break, and that's your longest break that you have. Carter, yeah, he's fascinating to me. Real quick follow-up. Did you know that the plate discipline was going to come out like this at any point? Because obviously we had that conversation about a Julien and some other, like Corbin Carroll. We had this conversation about Carroll, right? This guy was always going to walk. With Carter, we knew that he could, but I don't remember you saying this guy is going to go through stretches where like he's walking like a madman. I didn't think this was happening.
I don't think I saw it to this degree. I mean, definitely loved the approach. Definitely thought that he was always going to hedge any whiff, even though the bat to ball has always been good with walks. He's consistently walked, and his run chase rates in the low 20s in the minor leagues. But I never saw Edouard Julien swing rates here. I mean, again, as a big leaguer, he's swinging around 34% of the time, expanding around 13%. I never saw that one coming. That has been really, really impressive. And I think to be able to do that at the big league level says a lot about just his ability to recognize spin, to see pitches, to feel the zone and know exactly where pitches are. I mean, I went back and watched some of the video over the last, handful of playoff plate appearances. Some of the takes are just insane. I mean, it's amazing how he's able to just spin on the ball 1 or 2 balls off that it was a pitcher's pitch. So again, that always is going to elevate the floor. And I think Evan Carter through this performance has definitely elevated the floor. But I think what ends up happening sometimes with these kind of guys is then people in turn elevate the ceiling. Think about what we talked about with Jeremy Pena and who he could be. I always said, really good glove. He's going to run into some homers and, you're going to have to take the inconsistent approach, and deal with it. And, did I think he'd be a little bit better this year? Absolutely. But did I think he was going to be a perennial all-star? No. And I think when he won World Series MVP, that's kind of what we saw. What is Jeremy Pena though, as a person and player? He's somebody that's not fazed by the big moment. He's built for it. And that's something that does matter. And that's baked into this here. But if we're talking about 162 performers, I'm interested to see what it looks like for Carter, because I think it might take him a couple years to reach that ceiling. I think he's going to find it. I think there could be that like Yelich type of trajectory. I don't think he's quite as freaky as Yelich, but that kind of trajectory. I just don't think it all happens next year, which is the one thing I just wanted to highlight. He's been one of my favorite prospects in the game for a long time, but the pull happy approach leaves him exposed against lefties. I mean, he slugged 263 against lefties if you combine the minor leagues and the big leagues this year. And that's that out and around pull happy approach that makes it hard left on left. There's little things like that he's going to have to figure out next year. And I think he will. And I think he's going to make a bunch of all-star games. Like I think he makes a handful of all-star appearances. but I think it's going to be a little bit more of a slower development to become the all-star. I think he's proven that he can be the above average regular right away. And I think he'll be that, but there will be some growing pains next year, in my opinion.
Do you think Josh Young starts at third base for the American League All-Star team again? Josh Young has been amazing this postseason. 5 extra base hits in 4 games. He has 6 hits and he's driven in 3. Young is a power presence in the middle of the best lineup in baseball right now. I mean, they were the best lineup in the American League all year long. Of course, they weren't as good as Atlanta, but wouldn't you know, Atlanta just got shut out by Ranger Suarez and Matt Strahm and the rest of the gang in Philly. Josh Young does look like a middle of the order masher. He was an all-star this year. Is this a sign of more things to come? Do you think that Josh Young can be one of the better third basemen in the American League?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen enough at this point. I mean, this guy's come back from 2 injuries that really stifle momentum here for hitters. You have a lead labrum and you've got a thumb. And both times shakes off the rust and picks up where he left off. But one thing that really stands out to me, Jack, is the defense. I don't know if you've watched the last few games. I mean, the range, the ability to just cover ground. Yeah, he's making throws on the run. He looks like an above average defender. And that's something that I always had as a future grade. I was always hoping would translate, and it has. And that's a big part of it as well. If he doesn't get hurt this year, he's a 3-win player. The one, I guess, hiccup for him is he's a very aggressive hitter. And that's the one thing that I could see kind of doing him in at points. He's chased well over 30% most of his minor league career, chased over 30% this year, but he's elevating the ball as much as ever. I mean, it's sub 40% ground ball rate. He's able to make above average contact in terms of just the contact rates. The only reason why the strikeout rate is hovering around 30% is because he's aggressive. I think that's something that'll continue to get better, but hits the ball hard, hits it in the air, plays good defense, and just seems to be consistent and just steady. There's the, again, I don't think he's going to be as good, but there's the shades of like Austin Riley type of reliability there. Wow. That, makes it fun for me. I think like an Austin Riley light is a similar, profile here. I think he's probably better defender, not as good of a ceiling or high of a ceiling offensively, but man, dude, I'll take Austin Riley light at third base any day of the week.
I think everybody should be looking for Austin Riley, especially offensively. That guy is kind of, I don't want to say he's like the right-handed version of the Jordan profile, but that's kind of what Riley is. He's not going to punch out 30% of the time or 35% of the time. He's going to elevate the ball and he's going to hit it ridiculously hard. And I love that from a bigger bodied third baseman. I think that any like heftier third baseman growing up is probably looking at Austin Riley saying, I want to be that.
Yeah.
And if Josh Young can be anywhere close to that, they're in a really good spot moving forward.
That's what I
Gunner's played some third. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think it's like this, like could be 65, 70% Austin Riley. Like that's really damn good.
Yeah. That's a top 10 third baseman in baseball because Riley is 2 or 3. Yeah. Gunnar Henderson has played in third. He's going to play short, it seems, moving forward. Gunnar, in his first 2 postseason games, is 3 for 8 with the nuke of all nukes that somehow made its way to Zach Hampel, which pissed us off. We mentioned that on the Just Baseball show, but whatever. Gunnar, man, like he looks really comfortable here. And I don't know, lineup construction for Baltimore is a little weird right now, but it's kind of been weird all year long. You've got Gunnar hitting right in front of Aaron Hicks, but he's the cleanup man. It's just kind of bizarre where they have him. I don't know if this is the picture perfect situation for Gunnar Henderson, but the fact that he will run away with American League Rookie of the Year and looks this comfortable in the postseason, I think is a testament to who this guy is. And this is just the very start of who he can become.
I mean, seeing the left on left nuke too, because that was been a little bit of an Achilles heel for him, has been the left on left situation. That home run really like hit home of like, this guy's going to be a superstar, but you have a whole season to work with here. So it's one of those situations where it's a little bit different. We got a lot of body of work here and, snippet of last year to feel very good about Gunnar Henderson being a superstar for the foreseeable future. I agree. I want to see him playing shortstop every day. And I think he will ultimately be doing that next year. And he's probably going to accumulate ridiculous WAR numbers because of that. but it's just been really fun to watch him perform on the big stage. I know the Orioles have not played the way that we were hoping they would, and there's been some swing and miss there for Gunnar. Sure, he's had to kind of line up against a lot of lefties so far, but the way he's been able to hold his own while lining up against some southpaws, and again being in this big spot, you can't really poke a hole in Gunnar's game right now other than the left on left stuff, and he just hit a nuke on the biggest stage, left on left. So I feel as good as I've ever felt about Gunnar Henderson. There's not much else to say about him at this point other than, I think he's a dark horse MVP candidate next year.
Damn. As early as next year?
I think he could be. If he's playing shortstop, I think so. I think it's very possible. In that lineup, with what he's shown this year, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Especially with Ohtani in the National League when he signs that deal with the Rockies.
I hope
that opens up space for Gunnar. That'd be great. Ohtani and Tovar. What do you make of Jordan Westberg? Back-to-back lefties have started against Baltimore, so Westberg has been in the lineup. He's been an early Yank. He's 1 for 5 with a double so far. If Gunnar is playing shortstop every day, is Westberg the second baseman moving forward for Baltimore? Is he in the thoughts of Mike Elias and Brandon Hyde moving forward? He feels extraneous at points this postseason.
It's interesting. It's his offensive game is definitely more developed and more equipped to help them now than a Joey Ortiz, and that's why he's there. And he's had stretches where he looks really, really solid, and I've always loved him as a prospect, as a top 100 guy. But I do feel like when you look around and you see Kobe Mayo, who's I think was one of the best performers in the entire minor leagues this year, who we'll be talking about later this week, and just some of the other pieces that they have in the fold. Even a Heston Kjerstad in terms of offensive ceiling, he does feel a little bit extraneous. That said, I mean, it says a lot about, how much confidence the Orioles have in him that he's playing in these spots. And I thought he's had some good at-bats. I don't think the results have totally been there, but just watching these games, I thought he's looked very comfortable. He's spoiled a lot of tough pitches. He's, put some good swings on balls. He's a really solid player. But it's interesting. I mean, the conversation that we've been having all year long is, who fits in better long-term, Westberg, Ortiz. If they didn't have a shortstop, you probably make the case for Ortiz. They don't need a shortstop. They need somebody that can just contribute offensively. And, Westberg's doing that a little bit better at the big league level. I'm really fascinated to see how they handle things this offseason, because the one thing that's been a little bit concerning for me is that Westberg's been just kind of blown up by fastballs. Over the last 40 games, hitting a $180 against fastballs, that was not an issue for him earlier in the year. But even if you extrapolate over his last 60 games, just big league fastballs with carry just seem to be affecting him. 644 OPS against those. So I wonder if they look at some of the underlying metrics, feel like Westberg's ceiling is somewhat capped. He's more of that, versatile infielder that you love to have on your team. But if you're going to make a trade at a 40-man crunch, I do wonder if Westberg's one of those guys that could be the odd man out. That said, I think he's looked really solid this postseason overall.
Yeah, if you were to, and I feel like we play this game consistently, but especially with Jackson Holliday at AAA now, I want to revisit the game. You've got Gunnar at short moving forward. I think Kobe Mayo is the third baseman of the future, maybe, or he's at first base, but Mountcastle has been one of the better hitters against left-handed pitching in all of baseball. It seems like he's figuring it out as he gets healthy against right-handed pitching. He can still factor in moving forward. Holliday will probably play second base, I guess. He's the future of the second base position. So Westberg, Ortiz, Norby. You hold on to one, you ship two. Which two are you shipping for Dylan Cease?
It's crazy, man, because I feel like Norby bat-wise might be the most intriguing. I mean, the guy's just a machine offensively, and I think he's just a little bit higher ceiling in terms of like being able to hit for average, can hit for similar amounts of power. And Westberg's EVs are a little bit better, but Norby guy had 169 hits this year. That is insane. He's just a hit machine.
Dude, nobody wants to talk about hits anymore. Come on.
I understand that. Okay, 22 pumps. How does that sound, buddy? 40 doubles, 4 triples.
Thanks, buddy.
It's crazy, buddy. I just buddied you on the big stage here. Sorry about that. We'll work that out later. Well, I'm sorry. That was too far. But no, it's like it's unbelievable. You could highlight the hits. You can highlight the extra base hits. He's been a machine. I'm kind of find myself more fascinated by Norby's offensive upside. Again, if they didn't have two shortstops who are better than Ortiz, I'd say, oh, I love the defense that Ortiz brings to the table and go from there. But is it crazy that I'd lean Norby at this point? I mean, after the slow-ish start that he shook off, I mean, he was one of the best hitters in the minor leagues, 940 OPS over his final 65 games. And if I'm looking at those profiles, you just want the best bat. I think Norby may wind up being the best bat. So I'm packaging probably Ortiz and Westberg or one of those guys, and then you have another one waiting in the wings. But it's fascinating. The one thing I do think we could see with Norby is he plays more left field, and he seems to be more comfortable out there than Westberg. And Ortiz, his value comes from shortstop. So I'm going to keep Norby probably because I think he can play left field for them next year. And that's what he did down the stretch. That's what he did when they won the championship, where he went 3 for 3, by the way, with a homer and 2 walks while playing left field and batting second. I think Norby fits in.
Yeah, they have a lot of corner outfield options, which is the only reason why I may push back a little bit. And I also ask you to kind of look internally and say, how confident are you that Jackson Holliday can play a big league shortstop next year? I want 2 shortstops. I know Mateo can still be around, but I know Gunnar can play short. I want another guy on my big league roster that can play shortstop as well. Right. Norby can't.
No.
Right?
No, and so Westberg can if you really needed it.
Exactly. And Ortiz can play a great one. Yeah. I think Ortiz is surely one of the odd men out. But, man, if you can package Ortiz, either Westberg or Norby, and a Kyle Stowers, who's clearly phased out of their plans, you can get a top 20 pitcher in baseball on the trade market for that trio. Yeah. So now's the time to do it. But this is an offseason conversation. Like we kind of got sidetracked there. Westberg moving forward looks like a big leaguer. Is it with the Baltimore Orioles? I think the answer is TBD. Royce Lewis looks like a perennial all-star. Royce is amazing. We're going to talk 3 Minnesota Twins, and the first one being Lewis. So far, Royce Lewis in 4 games is 4 for 15, but 3 of his 4 hits have left the yard. He's got 4 driven in. He's walked 3 times. He's punched out 5 times. In 4 games, he's rocking a 1256 OPS. He has arrived, and somehow he's doing this on one hamstring and then a pair of rubber bands in the other one. It's amazing what this guy is doing. And much like his teammate Byron Buxton, we're hoping that we see health. We're hoping that we see a full 162, because I think everybody's kind of gotten a glimpse of what could be with Royce Lewis.
I mean, including the postseason, the last 40 games for this guy, 302, 397, 658 slash line. It's a 1,054 OPS, 16 home runs in 40 games. And what's so remarkable to me is you mentioned Buxton and something similar that Buxton whiffs more. But what's amazing with Buxton is he hits the ball really hard, hits it in the air. And most guys that have consistently elite EVs, it's a lot of ground balls mixed in there. Again, you have the Jordans of the world and the generational power guys that hit in the air. Those guys are putting up 40, 45 home runs. When you have a guy that's running a ground ball rate in the 30% range, 35% range, and then hitting the ball in terms of exit velocities, a 90th percentile around 107, 108. I mean, that's 35, 40 home run potential. I'm not saying he's going to do that because a big part of his game is finding the gaps, being a good runner, hitting line drives. But if this guy's sold out for power the way that Byron Buxton kind of did as he continued to get, banged up and hurt, I think he could be a 3 true outcome, hit it 40 times out of the yard. But that's not who he is. That's not what makes him so good. It's just amazing. You're seeing some one-offs, or not even one-offs. I've seen him hit 114, 115 a handful of times. So we're talking about plus power. We're talking about above average contact rates. He runs pretty low chase rates. I mean, this guy has as much offensive upside as really any rookie in the game. And he's still just 24 years old. He'll be 24 at the start of next season. So it feels like he's like one of those 27-year-old rookies that are like, oh, he's finally here and finally healthy. He's young still. And this is a really, 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 really special talent. I'm very interested to see how they handle him, because I think it's gotten to the point where, yes, I do want to see the wheels. I do want to see him go gap to gap. I do think that there's defensive value there, but similar to how they've handled Buxton, and Buxton's a way more extreme example because he really just can't get out of his own way health-wise. I do have to wonder how much more they prioritize the bat here, because in terms of the production we've seen recently and the underlying data, this guy has superstar offensive potential, even if he's just DHing. So it's an interesting balance here because now they got two guys like that. But again, Lewis is younger, not as much of an injury history. It's a rough one, but it's not as bad. And there's still some reason to hope. But, where do you put him? Maybe second base makes a little bit more sense. They got some things to work out there, but I'm excited to see how they handle him.
So that was going to be my follow-up there. You say, they could really enjoy the defensive potential. I ask you where, because Correa is obviously playing an elite shortstop. Julien, you can move over to first base, but then that displaces Kirilloff. Do you shove Kirilloff in a corner again? Like, it feels like Lewis is kind of adding to this DH logjam. And the last place you want a logjam is designated hitter. And that's what Minnesota's got going on right now. It would be great if he could play a high-level second base. Do you think third base could be in the cards?
That's his home, I think.
Feels like the Miranda ship has sailed a little bit.
Yeah. Between the year that he had and the injury, he's a change of scenery candidate for me, Miranda. I think he can still be great. I mean, the year that he had was one of the best minor league seasons we've seen. And I don't think that was a fluke. I think he's been hurt. And I think, his confidence was beat up. Royce Lewis at the hot corner probably makes more sense. As you were about to say that, I was thinking about him like, wait, the way he can move his arm, like that total, I'm with you. I think he could play, honestly, a plus third base and a really, really good one there. He's made some plays. He showed us flashes of that this year. You got him at third and you got Correa at short. That is an elite left side of the infield defensively. I know Correa was banged up this year. I'm not going to put much stock in the defensive metrics. And then, second base, you can kind of plug and play. Some days you can, put Julien at first. And that's where you should be rotating the DH role. Like you mentioned, you don't want that logjam. You rotate the DH role. But to answer your question, I love Royce Lewis at third. And I think that's where the Twins end up placing him with, some scheduled off days in the DH spot.
And I think if you had to hand in a lineup and say, this is it for 162, if you can have Lewis at third, Correa at short, Julien at second, and Kirilloff at first, I'm a very happy camper, personally.
Yeah. This team's
and then
not going
Buxton
anywhere.
DH.
This team's not going
nowhere
anytime soon.
Let's shift to Julien here, because Julien, it's kind of more of the same. 4 games, he's doing pretty much what he did at the big league level for the regular season. Edouard Julien, 13 plate appearances. He's 3 for 11, but he's walked twice. He's got a 385 OBP. He's got a double, a ribby, and he's punched out 4 times in 13 plate appearances. I'm really impressed by Julien not striking out 1 billion times during the regular season. The whiff was there, obviously. I thought it was going to be worse, to be frank. But Julien, man, I think he did a great job introducing himself to baseball fans in the regular season. And now they're seeing a guy that is at the top of that lineup that is going to see so many pitches. And he is exactly what I want from a leadoff hitter. I want 8 pitch at bats to open games. And that's who Julien is. And sometimes those end in a double. A lot of times those end in a walk. If they end in a strikeout, okay, not best case scenario, but you still saw 8 pitches and he saw the kitchen sink. Yeah. Everybody's calling him Eddie Julien now, or Edward Julien. He's from Quebec City. What do you want to do? Eddie Julien, or do you want to do Edouard Julien? It's easy enough.
Edouard Julien, that's who he is.
Let's do it, man. It's brutal. Like the Americanization of Edouard Julien, like that's not tough. Uyangalele, like we learned that. Let's just commit to Edouard Julien.
It's really not that hard. There's just an O mixed in there, which is a little French, but that's about it, right? Like that's
but just like EN on the back of his last name, Julien. It's not Julien, it's Julien.
Julien. Yeah. So I thought the way you laid it out was perfect. And I thought game 1 against the Astros kind of epitomized what you can get from him, which is what you would take from a Major League Baseball player pretty much every single day of the week. Of course, it's slightly elevated K rate if you extrapolate it, but 1 for 4 with a double and a walk. I will take that every single day of the week. Yes, again, if you extrapolate that, that's a 40% K rate. But again, you're going to mix in some, 1 for 4s with no Ks, and you'll mix in, some 2 for 5s or whatever it is, and you'll settle on a K rate in the 30% range. But the point being, it's not traditional. I know that the old heads might not love it, but I think Julien's a smart hitter here that realized I'm probably not going to hit enough bat to ball wise to be this, this guy that's going to hit for average and consistently be able to get a swing off and make contact. It's hard, but he's like, I got power. I see the ball really well. I'm going to leverage those two things. That's exactly what he's done. Another guy that's just hitting it in the air and walking. And, again, yeah, he's going to strike out naturally by going deep into counts, but hedges that really well. What stood out to me the most and what we're seeing more in this postseason is I think he's starting to cut down on that ground ball rate. That's the big thing. Like there was spurts where he was not hitting the ball in the air enough. And now that he's starting to cut down on that, it's been really fun to see. But my thing in the postseason lens of this is you could see a guy that has that approach. Same thing with Evan Carter. Big stage. I want to do a little bit more. I want to start getting some swings in. I want to make something happen as a leadoff guy. But no, they put him in his position where he can be who he is, which is, like you said, see more pitches, doesn't stray from the approach at all. Even if he struck out twice, doesn't stray. And I think that's what says a lot about him to me. I think this is going to be what you can get from Julien kind of moving forward consistently. And that's a really good baseball player.
I mean this in a nice way. It looks like he doesn't think sometimes offensively. Yeah. It looks like he doesn't really comprehend the magnitude of the moment. It's, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to see a bunch of pitches. Dude, you're leading off game 1 of the ALDS in Houston against the reigning World Series champ. Like, get nervous for a minute, please. But like, it just seems like he's saying, like it's kind of Saturday. Like I played a billion Saturdays this year, so it's just Saturday again, which I love about Julien, and it's pretty funny. Matt Walner is a guy that has gotten some situational plate appearances. He's 0 for 6 so far. He's punched out 3 times. Walner is a fascinating piece for Minnesota moving forward, because I would not bank on him to be an everyday fixture in their lineup. I don't even know if I would bank on him to be a platoon fixture. I think that you have a lot of guys with pop and whiff in that lineup that you don't need the one that might be the poppiest and the whiffiest.
Yeah, it's funny because on another team, I actually think Walner's a good fit for certain teams. I've been really impressed overall. I was with you. I was somewhat out in terms of just, is he ever going to hit enough? And this guy's cut the chase down. I'm sure just hanging out with Edouard Julien has helped. He's probably like, why hit the ball harder than that guy?
Stop swinging, bro.
Just don't swing as much, man. And he's cut it down. To your point, though, on this team, he does feel like the odd man out. But I did want to give kind of the flip side of this conversation. 0 for 6 3Ks has been bad in the postseason, but I actually think he's found his way into being a platoon guy at the highest level. I do, because he's miserable against lefties. Just don't hit him against lefties. But against righties, since he got called up at the big league level, I mean, he has been really, really solid. And if you even extrapolate over like the last 30 games, 273, 423, 494 slash line, that's including, that the big league games, or excuse me, the playoff games so far. His exit velocities are stupid. Like they are ridiculous. They are up there with some of the best in the sport. And that's what stands out to me. So it's like, if you could just make below average contact and hit it in the air, you're in business. Last 75 games for him, 111 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity, only a 29% ground ball rate. Those two things alone, I'm like, okay, you're going to get your homers. And the other thing, cuts the chase rate down to 25%. Zone contact is 70%. That'll play. That's fine. So I think this guy's kind of found himself. And that's what stands out to me is I think this guy's kind of just figured out what's going to work for him. Is that valuable on the Minnesota Twins? Maybe not. Maybe he's the odd man out. Maybe he gets moved. But I think he's found himself as some sort of platoon type that you're just going to have to palate the good with the bad and deal with it. But I think he can hit righties.
I think he can command a good reliever too. And Minnesota's got good relievers. They have who I think is the best reliever in baseball. And Duran, Griffin Jacks looks great. Thielbar looks great at times, but they could always add a good reliever. And I think Walner is the return for a good reliever this offseason. So I think that would be a great thing. And hey, if he's a platoon bat sitting on your bench, that's not a bad thing at all.
No.
National League now, I've got 3 guys in the National League that I want to talk about, and then we'll get to the pitchers. Johan Rojas with the Phillies is 1 for 10 with 5 Ks. He's not hitting, but we know he's going to be in the 8th spot, and we know that he's going to make some tremendous plays defensively. has the ship sailed on, I don't know, every day? Like, I don't even think we were expecting him to be a top of the order guy. I close your eyes and tell me who you think Johan Rojas is moving forward. Is he a 9 hitting center fielder for a really good team?
Yes. I see like
okay,
a different profile, but in a different way, like a Jose Siri type, right? Jose Siri, it's high amount of Ks, home runs. With Rojas,
I was going to say like Miles Straw.
Yeah, Miles Straw would probably be a better comp, but I think he's better than Straw. Like that's the thing. So I think he's like an elevated Miles Straw, which
cool.
In this postseason, you're kind of seeing there's just ways that he's able to still impact the game. You mentioned the defense. Yeah, I'd love to see him not go 0 for 7 with 4 punch outs over the last 2 games, but he's going to go get them. He's a threat on the bases. I think something along the lines of a 4th outfielder or the 9-hitting center fielder that plays elite D. Like that's what he is. And honestly, I think that's exactly what the Phillies needed on this team right now. Because you have Marsh, but I think they needed a little bit more defense and speed, and he gives them that.
100%. James Outman is a guy that looked really nervous in his postseason debut, and Outman was 0 for 2. I don't want to say botched because it was a double for Ketel Marte, but that's a play that Outman made, I think 10 times out of 10 during the regular season when it hit off the heel of his glove, and he got, a late jump to it, and then he leaped at the last moment. He looked so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I hope he's not fazed by the big moment, but we had a whole year to work with. I love who Outman is moving forward. You have to ride the roller coaster. He's going to put together stretches where he's an MVP candidate, but that's not going to be over a whole year. That's going to be over 3 weeks. And then there are 3 weeks where it's like, is he an Oklahoma City Dodger yet? But then that's when he snaps right back into his MVP candidacy.
And then you settle somewhere around an 820 OPS, which is really good. But I feel like this is one of those instances, no matter how bad James Outman is in the postseason, to your point, I think we've seen enough that you can feel pretty good about who he is and what player he's become, and that he's a big piece for the Dodgers moving forward. But I did see the same thing. The game looked quick for him. It didn't look like the same James Outman that was going to get it in the outfield, and that, it looked a little bit more comfortable at the plate. This is a dude, though, that I'm, again, the other side of the coin here. No matter how bad the postseason goes, I'm looking at him next year still as a 780 to 820 OPS guy and doing something similar to what he did this year. I don't think much better. I don't think much worse. And no matter how the postseason goes. Yeah.
He's a war getter. He was 800 OPS. Was he a 4.5 win player this year?
No way. Was he really?
I think so. He was like big time. James Outman, because he played such a good center field, James Outman was a 118 WRC plus and a 4.4 F4 this year on 151.
That's freaking fantastic.
He's a 4.5 win player, man, but he's going to look like a negative 4.5 win player, I'm telling you, at points for like 2 week stretches, but then he looks like an 11 win player at points too.
Yeah. And you got to also take into account the situations where we're talking about a Gunnar Henderson, who's been a top prospect in baseball, who's was drafted early. We're talking about a Corbin Carroll, early first round pick. Some of these guys have kind of been in the spotlight for a while. Outman's a 26-year-old rookie who's getting his first taste of the postseason. Sometimes it just feels a little bit different for those guys. And I think he'll be fine long-term, but it's just one game so far too. He could end up going nuts the rest of the way. But I'm saying if he does struggle, it's a different case here for James Outman, who, already has exceeded any reasonable expectation. I don't even know if his family would have believed that his year would have went the way it has going into the season. And, that's a testament to his talent and figuring things out this year.
Hey, what do you think of this Corbin Carroll cat in Arizona?
He's all right. Yeah, he's pretty good.
He's fine. 3 games so far in the postseason. He's 6 for 12 with a double, 2 homers, 4 driven in, walked twice, punched out once in 14 plate appearances, sporting a 1654 OPS. When's his first MVP? Next year? Do we give it to him early?
Depends which league Ohtani goes. Oh, actually, Ohtani won't get it next year because he can't pitch. So he's got to really, really hit.
But he's going to hit 70 homers with the Rockies next year. So, you have to factor that in.
No, to be honest, man, it's amazing when a rookie is your best player. It's just on a playoff team. And
Yeah.
I mean, he's their best player. I know Ketel Marte's played out of his mind. Even on the pitching side, Zach Allen's been great. Corbin Carroll is their best player. And it's amazing how many different ways he can impact the game. That goes back to when we talked about him as the number one prospect in baseball and why he was that. The power, we're seeing it. The speed, we've been seeing it. The defense, been seeing it. And talk about a dude that is just totally unfazed by the big stage. Where is this team without Corbin Carroll? I have no idea. 6 hits in 3 games, a couple nukes, as you mentioned, and they were like not cheapies either. They were absolute moon tanks. He's going to win an MVP soon. I'll tell you that. And it's been so fun to watch this guy play. He is a special, special, special player.
Yeah. All right. 5 pitchers, 2 American League, same team, 3 National League. Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall. One looked really, I used the word timid on the Just Baseball show, and I'll stand by that word choice. I thought Grayson looked like his shoulders were tense the entire time. And it's impossible to throw 100 miles an hour when your shoulders are tense. So they were not literally tense. But we talked about it, that lollipop throw over to first base when Mitch Garver beat it out for an infield single, that I think that told everybody all you needed to know about how Grayson Rodriguez felt.
Yeah.
G-Rod looked amazing after he came back from Norfolk. He really did not look good in his postseason debut. Do you take anything from this, or are you going into next year saying this guy is the opening day starter for Baltimore? Let's move.
I mean, Bradish might end up still being that guy because Bradish has been awesome. But
True.
The actual answer is I don't take much from it at all. I think it's a good thing in the long term. I'm sure that we're going to hear conversations. I hope we have one with him because you know how long I've adored his ability to pitch. But you know, I'm sure we'll have conversations or hear them in 2-3 years where he's going to pinpoint that start and talk about how that was a learning experience for him one way or another. You know, we talked about it on the Just Baseball show. He was put in a position that no rookie should really be put in. Hey, we're down 1-0 and we need you to shove against one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball. What I did take from this outing, though, was he definitely is reliant on the fastball, and it worked for him in the regular season. But when you have a team that is very prepared for you, very locked in on what you're going to do, and has seen you throwing 60% fastballs down the stretch of the season, and that was the way you had success, you better be pinpoint with that fastball. And he threw fastballs 75% of the time. 44 of his 59 pitches were 4-seam fastballs. Only 57% landed for a strike. So you talk about the tension. I think that was part of it. You talk about falling behind, then he can't go to that slider, which is, you know, actually has been one of his most effective pitches this year. We only saw him throw 4 breaking balls in that outing, 11 changeups. He threw some fantastic changeups. And I do think it's funny, to your point, that the changeup was great. 8 of the 11 that he threw were for strikes, and he got a bunch of whiffs on it. Every whiff he got was on the changeup. Good.
It looked amazing.
That's a field pitch. That's a pitch that he will not allow himself to choke. Fastball, I felt like, to your point, he was choking it. And it just didn't have it. And that was what it was for me. And that's really it. I think it'll be a learning experience for him. And I think if he gets another shot to pitch this postseason, I think he'll be better. I really do. But yeah, it was tough to watch because it was 100, 99, 98, but just not where we've seen him commanding it over the last handful of starts, where, you know, he was spotting fastballs for a strike around 70% of the time down the stretch.
Yeah. His teammate looked really strong out of the bullpen in game 1 on the heels of Bradish, and that was DL Hall. Inning and 2/3, no hits. He walked 1. He punched out 3. Hall's a reliever moving forward, and I think that Hall can become one of the better left-handed relievers in baseball as soon as he commits to this. And I think what that inning and 2/3 told us is that DL Hall is ready to be a top-flight reliever. It's like the Matt Brash ascension. As soon as you take him out of the rotation, like, he's set to rock it, and this guy looked unhittable against Texas in game 1.
He was awesome. Just totally awesome. It's been wild to watch his mechanical improvements too. He was a very upright guy. And I want to preface with, since being called up to the big leagues, 7% walk rate. That is not something we're used to seeing from DL Hall at all.
Okay, so real quick though, you hear that and you say, "Oh, he might be ready to start games." No, he's comfortable as a reliever now.
Yeah.
This is not like a he might be ready to start games thing.
No.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah. I think both from an injury standpoint and from a, just a delivery standpoint. Like and to your point, this delivery is higher effort. People were talking about, and not higher effort in terms of like pressure on his arm. I mean, like really engaging the lower half. He used to be a very vertical guy. Now, if you watch him, he sinks and he really drives off of that back leg. And I mean, that's what we saw Chapman do this year to try to get that velocity back. It's not as dramatic as that, but DL Hall was always a very upright pitcher. And I thought that was kind of part of the issue. Now you see him sinking low and really pushing off of that back leg and driving. That's a high, like that takes energy. That really takes a strong lower half. He's always been a very strong and athletic pitcher, but I think that's what's allowed him to kind of stay close to his body. He's more compact. Everything is not, kind of out and away from him. And he's filling up the strike zone. And to your point, that postseason that postseason appearance was dominant. Inning 2/3, 1 walk, 3 Ks, no hits. And that was after he closed out the season punching out the side. I mean, this guy has not given up a run in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 was an unearned, 8. Last 8 outings at the big league level, 0 earned runs. This guy's going to be a big part of their postseason if they make any kind of turnaround, and he's going to be a big part of their bullpen next year.
I think so. Yeah, especially with Bautista out, Cano, I think immediately slots into that closer role. They need a setup guy. They need an 8th inning guy, and I think DL Hall can be one of the better 8th inning guys in baseball next year. 2 National League starters before we wrap with an NL reliever. 2 guys in the same series. Brandon Pfaadt has not thrown against the Dodgers just yet. He will likely throw game 3. It was a tightrope act against Milwaukee in the wild card series. Emmett Sheehan was the first out of the pen when Clayton Kershaw got blasted in game 1 on Saturday by the Diamondbacks. Let's start with Pfaadt. It was such a hard regular season to watch. And I think a lot of people went in with minimal confidence in Brandon Pfaadt in this wild card game. And he managed to maneuver around 7 hits in 2 1/3 for Pfaadt, 2 2/3, 7 hits, 3 earned. Like it was not a good start. Arizona's offense just picked him up and they got a win in game 1 of that wild card series. Where do you see Brandon Pfaadt slotting into the D-backs plans next year? I assume they go and get a free agent starting pitcher. They need starting pitching depth. They're going to do it. Is Pfaadt a guy that you can rely on as a 4 or a 5, or does he start the year as a Reno ace?
I think you got to start him in the big leagues and try to rely on him at the back of that rotation. It's just the difference is if he's your 4 or your 5, you can palette the ups and downs a bit more. This is another situation we talked about on the JB show with like Framber Valdez as an established big leaguer, just struggling with something in his delivery. The stuff isn't kind of playing the way that it has in the past. And it's really hard to change that mid-season. I think they tried to help Pfaadt with that when he got a little, taste and slowed things down and then came back up. But I just don't think he really had an opportunity to fully delve into things and figure out exactly what has changed, because it's interesting. He's still getting a fair amount of whiff. He's still throwing strikes in a lot of the starts that I've seen. I'm interested to do a deeper dive. I'm still a believer in him. I still think he can be really solid, but he's got to tweak some things. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into what exactly went wrong. But I thought we saw some flashes at the end of the season, including a really good outing against the White Sox to close it out. I know that's not saying a ton, but then even like a bad outing where he gives up a couple big home runs against the Yankees, he punched out 8. Like we're starting to see him get more whiffs. So I think it's starting to come together a little bit. It just sucks that then as it's starting to come together, he gets thrusted into the postseason. I do think he's going to be better next year. I think they're going to go back to the drawing board and tweak some things with his arsenal, because there's a few different ways he can attack hitters. And I don't know if he totally can figure out what the most effective way is just yet.
What do you think Sheehan needs to be tweaking? Because Emmett Sheehan came out and he was running into a buzzsaw, but Sheehan, after Kershaw got hung for 6 runs, went 3 2/3, 4 hits, 3 earned. He struck out 4. He walked 2 and hit a batter. Sheehan also allowed a homer. 60% fastball. He's got that slider and the changeup. Slider, I guess, sometimes turns into a sweeper per savant. But for me, watching that guy and seeing the fastball reliance, is a little worrisome second time you see a guy. And like, I don't know. We've seen the blow up starts from Joe Ryan. It's just Joe Ryan looked unhittable at points, and Sheehan has not looked unhittable since his big league debut.
You answered your own question there.
Okay.
It's fastball reliance. I think you're spot on, and it's a phenomenal heater. It's a low release point. It takes.
But
off.
if you throw it the whole time, it becomes less phenomenal.
Yes, these are big league hitters. And unless you're Bryce Miller or Brian Wu, and you can go in, out, up, down, and spot. When those guys are on, they rely on it, but they spot. Sheehan's a little bit of a sprayer, and that's okay when you have that kind of life. But if you're a sprayer, you need the changeup, you need the cutter, you need the sweeper, you need those all to locate. Changeup strike rate of 59%, it's just not going to play, especially when that's his best pitch. The cutter, I think it's two different pitches. I think he manipulates it. I'm not, because we see cutters as hard as 87, 88, and then we see sliders like sweepers in the low 80s. But the cutter specifically, like that's a pitch that needs to be spotted for a strike as much as a four-seam fastball, or at least close to it. He's around 60%. If that was the sweeper, tolerable. Cutter, not as much, especially because he throws that more than the sweeper. And then again, the fastball, he throws a first strike about an average amount, but he's not hitting the spots as much and too many non-competitive pitches. So for me, that's all it is. I think he'll get there. The stuff is too good. It's a big pitcher's body. He doesn't even need great command. It just needs to be average. But I think you hit the nail on the head. When you know there's a 60% chance of fastballs coming, and you know that there's a good chance he's not going to locate the other stuff that well, I'm going to sit fastball, and I'm going to sit fastball in a specific location. And that's kind of what guys have been doing against him.
We're running into a weird scenario in 2024 with the Dodgers rotation. I'm trying to like put Sheehan in somewhere in the jigsaw puzzle for the Dodgers in 24. And I'm thinking, okay, Urias is good as gone. Kershaw probably gone. I would put the odds more in favor of him not being a Dodger than him being a Dodger next year. And then you've got Gonsolin on the shelf the whole year with Tommy John. So Buehler going to start opening day, I assume. After that, Bobby Miller.
Yep. And
then Stone Pepio Sheehan.
Yeah, and I would say Pepio's earned it. I mean, he's been spectacular.
Pepio's totally earned it.
So Pepio's probably my favorite of that trio, which is crazy to say. And it shows you the fluidity of this whole thing sometimes with prospects, especially pitchers. And then Sheehan and Stone. Yeah, I mean, those guys are going to have to step up and perform. I assume they signed somebody, but they're still going to need two of those guys to step up without a doubt.
And throw Grove in that conversation too. I guess Michael Grove can be in there, but like Grove has done pretty well in like a hybrid relief role too. So I don't know. They have a ton of questions that I need answered going into next year in the rotation. Last guy is Orion Kirkland with the Phillies, and Kirkland has thrown 2 innings so far in the postseason, no hits, a walk, and a strikeout. He got through an inning against the best offense in baseball in 7 pitches, and he looked so ridiculously comfortable. He's obviously a massive part of the Phillies moving forward. Is he the closer next year for the Philadelphia Phillies? I assume not, because you have Alvarado and Dominguez. But man, like he could absolutely put together a year with a sub-2 ERA, because that's what he did in the minor leagues, and that shit's going to play against Acuna as much as it did the random 7-hitter for the Lakeland Flying Tigers.
Yep. I'll say he's probably not the closer, but he will pick up a handful of saves. And that, because you're trusting that guy in the 9th. You put him on my radar. And once I watched some of the video, it was comical. And that was when he was a Clearwater Thresher. And
it's funny because like I said, like, hey, check out Orion Kirkland's stats. And you were like, that's a fake name. And then you looked and said, oh my God, this is hilarious how disgusting the stuff is. And now here we are 5 months later talking about him in the postseason sporting 2 hitless innings.
So he has thrown 55%. This includes the postseason all the way to Clearwater. In 54 appearances this year, he has thrown a slider, an 80 grade slider, 55% of the time. What do you think opponents are hitting against that slider? In 109 at-bats.
About 20, about 30.
Oh, that was impressive. 119.
Yes.
That was good. That was good. But OPS of 358, dude.
Oh, so he's spotting it. That's what that says.
67% strike rate on a slider that's that diabolical. It's one thing to have a 60-something% strike rate, like 67% strike rate on a slider. To have it on a slider that absolutely falls off the table is ridiculous. And then, oh, by the way, he sits 98.
Yeah.
Did you see his dad crying like every pitch in his big league debut? That was awesome. Like, it's just his dad just like couldn't handle his emotion just the entire time. There's every strikeout, he's just sitting there crying, just so happy for his son. That was pretty cool.
It was beautiful. And the thing that fascinated me most about his appearance against the Braves, because he was crying the entire time during his major league debut, but against the Braves, they kept on showing his dad, and he was just like all business. He was sitting there, like, I think arms crossed, just looking, and he was watching his son dominate. It was 7 pitches, and I think one was that 98-mile-an-hour fastball. I think in the wild card game, it was like an 11 pitch inning, and 10 were the slider. I mean, he's not going to 99 because the other pitch is better. It's very Andres Munoz.
Yeah.
Munoz has 102, 103, but that slider is the best pitch that Munoz has. That's why he goes to it. Prime Chapman had 104, 105. And yes, it ran like crazy. Yeah, the fastball is his best pitch because it's 104 miles an hour. But statistically speaking, he had some other pitches that were better. Like his slider at points was better than his fastball. And that's what we're looking at with Kirkland. And that's a rare human being that we've got in this game, where 100 is not your best pitch. And that's some special shit, man.
That's scary. There's been one player across any level this year that has hit a home run off of Orion Kirkland slider, and it's Stanley Consuegra from the Mets.
I'm in.
Yeah, which is amazing. That's all I need to know. That's the final boss. You're going to be a good big leaguer, Stanley.
Was he a Brooklyn Cyclone or was he a St. Lucie Met?
I would imagine that was with Brooklyn. Yeah, that was definitely with Brooklyn. It was on June 30th. Yeah.
Oh, did he hit the Ferris wheel out in center? Have you been to Coney Island? That
I have.
Awesome.
It's one of my favorite minor league parks I've been to. It's a blast. I'm actually, oh my gosh. He actually did not miss the roller coaster by much. It was 110. I'm watching it right now.
Oh, wow.
110, 416. That is a really cool place to go catch a night game. Graveyard, by the way, though, because the ball does not fly, wind blowing in off the water. But if you're ever in the New York area, take the little 40-minute train, go check out Coney Island, go check out a Brooklyn Cyclones game. They do a great job over there. It's definitely a lot of fun. Or you could watch NYU play baseball. It's a little Division III ball. That's all I got, though. You got anything else?
No, that was the recruiting pitch on the D3 recruiting trail. It was, hey, you get to play at the home of the Brooklyn Cyclones, or I guess the Brooklyn Mets.
Yeah, dude, I'll never forget that. I think I've told you the story. Like I'm on the phone too on my way home from my senior year of high school, like from practice, and it's like, oh, let me call you back. We got to hop on the subway to practice, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound good to me.
Yeah. See, my thing was I'm in, and they were just like, yeah, it's gonna be way too much money. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no scholarship for Division III baseball, unfortunately. But that's it. We'll be doing first team MILB on Wednesday, including some of the honorable mentions. I might squeeze in a solo episode, or if Jack will join me on Tuesday to just kind of talk a little bit more about the AFL. Last episode was fun, just kind of highlighted a handful of starts that stood out to me at the AFL. Reminder that we'll be out there in a couple of weeks. Reminder that if you can take a second to leave a rating, help us grow the show, that would be awesome. And we will probably have a top 100 update by the end of this week. Most of those episodes will probably be next week, but just stay tuned. Check out the Just Baseball Twitter, my personal Twitter, to be up to date on when we are updating that top 100 list. Some fun names that are going to be joining the list, some names graduating. Excited for the final edition here of the 2023 side of things. And then we will start shifting our focus to the 2024 class and moving on from there. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.